Hi there, guys. So it's a provocative title, but before anyone accuses me of going full tin foil hat conspiracy mode, we know in this car finance ruling case that Rachel Reeves had already signalled an intention to overrule the Supreme Court if they came to the wrong judgment. And we also know that there were numerous warnings from car finance lenders that they would go bust if this ruling was upheld. So my question in this video is whether a judge can be immune from political pressure or outside influence. Is our legal system entirely impartial as it claims to be? Now, it's worth having a quick look at what Reeves was proposing to do in this case. So in The Guardian, they report on a Lib Dem MP's criticism of her. So let's have a quick look at that. So it says the Chancellor's attempt to intervene in car finance scandal was branded disgraceful. So Rachel Reeves' efforts to intervene in the Supreme Court case on the car finance scandal were, quote, unprecedented and disgraceful, and send a really bad message to consumers that the government is willing to defend wrongdoing by banks. And that's the Treasury Committee member and Lib Dem MP Bobby Dean has said that. So it goes on. While the Supreme Court largely sided with finance companies on Friday, helping lenders avoid a £44 billion compensation bill, Dean said the Chancellor had gone too far to show she was on the side of business. And that included a controversial attempt to intervene in the Supreme Court hearing in January, in which she urged judges to avoid handing windfall compensation to borrowers. And then that attempt was ultimately rejected on Friday in the new ruling. And he said, I thought it was pretty unprecedented and pretty disgraceful. Going on, and then this is a key part, it says the Chancellor had also been considering overruling the Supreme Court's decision with retrospective legislation to help save lenders billions of pounds in the event that it upheld the entirety of October's Court of Appeal ruling, The Guardian revealed last week. And then finally from Dean, he says, what message does it send to consumers that the industry can do wrong, that the courts can support the claim that they've done something wrong, but the government is ready to intervene and defend the industry that's done wrong instead of defending the consumer? I think that's a really bad message to put out. So going back to the question at hand, which was, is this car finance ruling an establishment stitch-up? In terms of the facts at our disposal, we know that there was huge political pressure from senior politicians on this topic. We know about the numerous warnings from car finance companies about lenders going bust. We also know that a lower court judge looked at the evidence in this case and came to a different conclusion than the judge in this most recent appeal hearing. Trump and the Tories are always complaining about lefty judges and enemies of the people. So do we think that they do that because it has no impact? Of course not. They do that to exert political pressure on decision makers. And then that brings us to a wider question, which is, to what extent can people remain entirely neutral and impartial about any issue in the face of huge external pressure? This judge making the ruling on Friday, he lives in this world. He will have views and opinions of his own. So to what extent can any person be totally free from influence, whether knowingly or unknowingly? We all have biases and ideology. No person is a blank slate. And I'll finish with this. The British state and the British legal system has a long history of closing ranks around establishment interests. So the case of the Birmingham Six, the Stephen Lawrence case, the Guildford Four case, the list of injustices goes on and on. So thinking about this question, it's an interesting thought experiment, because with populism on the rise and with politicians more willing than ever to attack the judiciary on any number of issues, we need to hold our judges to an extremely high standard, and we need them to maintain full autonomy and freedom from political pressure. So to answer the question that I set out at the beginning, I don't know. But politicians and big business, they exert pressure for a reason. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.